Let me help you with admitting people.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum all. Welcome to our weekly webinar. This is our third week on Salat, the 5 daily prayers, the Namaz. And inshallah, we'll be continue to read on the same topic. This week, Colin Hocam is finally back after a while. Welcome. And Salih is also with us again for the second week. As we know in the Risale-i Nur, Salat is extensively analyzed. Every single word we recite and every single action we do is talk about, and Ustad really makes us digest, the meanings and how significant they are, how it is crucial and directly related to our faith, and as we know, we act upon our beliefs, and the vice versa is interestingly correct. If we don't act upon our belief, we start believing as we act. So Salat is that significant, it's as important as our faith. When the Quran says all the time, amanu wa aminu salihat, the belief, talking about the belief, and after that the good works, the actions. Salat is definitely is a major part of the Islamic practice. So we need to constantly, maybe this is a lifetime reading, the parts about the Salat in the Risale, to really, put this into action and to make it alive in our lives, to support our belief and to make this connection all the time. Yet for the last 2 weeks, we are kind of dealing with this more practical part. We are doing this conversation with our nafs, with our shaitan, that kind of keeps us a little bit away from these treasuries, from this source of life. So we try to understand the dynamic, the relation of our slackness, our unwillingness, sometimes lacking the eagerness about the Salat. And so inshallah we will continue to read about it this week. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna as-salata kanat 'ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta. In the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate, indeed, daily prayers are enjoined on believers at stated times. We are following the 21st word for the third week. So for those who want to follow up from their books, we are on 5th warning of 21st word. O my world worshipping soul, O my world worshipping nafs, does your slackness in worship and remissness, your neglect in prescribed prayers, 5 daily prayers, arise from the multiplicity of your worldly occupations, or because you cannot find time due to the struggle for livelihood? Does your slackness in worship and remissness in the prescribed prayers arise from the multiplicity of your worldly occupations, or because you cannot find time due to the struggle for livelihood? So these are 2 main questions, inshallah we will focus on. Were you created only for this world? that you spend all your time on it? Were you created only for this world, that you spend all your time on it? You know that in regard to your abilities, you are superior to all the animals. In regard to your abilities, you are superior to all the animals. But in regard to procuring the necessities of world of life, you cannot compete with even a sparrow. In regard to procuring the necessities of world of life, you cannot compete with even a sparrow. So why can you not understand that your basic duty is not to labor like an animal, but to strive for a true perpetual life like a true human being? Okay. So I want to stop here and ask the speakers about this understanding of the human being. So for the last 2 weeks, we talk about our nafs, our desire. So what is the difference and significance of the human being? Why we cannot compare ourselves directly with the animals? You know, we have this struggle of livelihood. We have to eat for survival. We have some animal desires. So how we are really different than the animals? We will look like them, we act like them most of the time, and what's our real significance in this sense? You know, why we cannot just go with the rest of the flow? Saleh abi or Colin Hocam, any of you want to step in? Or at this point, you want to go on? Saleh?
I don't know, maybe Colin Abi should start.
Okay, I can start. It's not a problem. Salam alaikum. Nice to see everyone after a couple of weeks of being away. Before I think of the issue of the differences between human beings and other creatures, what jumps out at me on the screen is the sentence that appears in red. Were you created only for this world, that you spend all your time on it?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a kind of a rhetorical question, but it's pushing us to ask ourselves something that's very, very basic. And I think that the problem is one which comes from arranging our prayers around our lives rather than arranging our lives around our prayers. And I think this, beneath this problem, one of the causes of this problem is our secular understanding of belief and prayer. And I think this is because belief and submission, or if you want Islam, is packaged as religion, in inverted commas. And religion is framed as just another of the cultural possessions that make up our character and our personality. So just as we have a nationality, an ethnicity, a profession, a language, a family, a sport, a favorite football club, we also have a religion. So it's one of the boxes, you know, one of the pieces of cultural baggage that we happen to carry with us. This is why we see things differently. This is why we arrange our prayers, if we do prayers at all, around our lives and not the other way around. It's because we have become secularized. Our lives have become colonized by or colonialized by the forces of unbelief, and our faith has been secularized also by the forces of unbelief and the forces of atheism and, you know, secular materialism and liberalism. So our religion, our faith has been pushed into a box, and it's a box that we open only when we pray or when we fast. The rest of the time, that box is closed. So all of the other things that we do in life, which make up the majority of our time, the majority of our conscious existence, is engaged in securing sustenance, in working, in securing a livelihood, and we see those through a secular lens. We don't see those things as worship. And this is why we have this attitude that there is something called religion, which we have recourse to at the time of prayer, or when we fast, or on Friday when we go to Friday prayer, or when we pay zakat. And then the rest of the time, we see that as somehow secular and worldly. And this is secularism at its deadliest, you know. So to arrange your prayers, to your devotions, around your search for sustenance is actually to give prayer a secondary role in life. And that is evidence of how secularized we've become. We arrange our prayers around the rest of our lives rather than arranging the rest of our lives around our prayers. So the priority is wrong. The emphasis is incorrect. And this is why we see our search for sustenance. You see, the animals, when they search for sustenance, that is their worship. That is their devotion. That is their salat. Their search for sustenance is their worship of Allah. We have this problem of thinking that worship is only fulfilled by acts of worship, by prayer or by fasting, or by paying zakat, or by declaring the shahada, or by going to Hajj. We shouldn't really think in terms of acts of worship. What we should think in terms of is worshipful action. All of our action should become worshipful. And it can't when we are in this secular situation of making religion something different from the rest of our life and making salat something different from the rest of our daily activities. Thank you.
Thank you. This was very interesting. Yesterday we were talking about the actions of the Sahaba and the time of the Asr Saada. So how, you know, still centuries later, you know, we talk about their example and how it's an exemplary life for all the Muslims for all these centuries. But the most significant part was this, you know, they really believed that this is just a one-night hostel, and that was it. You know, how they deal with the worldly affairs, how they, you know, treat the people around them in this world was just that this is the trade place for one night, and we will just continue, just we'll go on, and after this. So as Colonel Jam explained very well, yes, now we are just for this world. That's our focus. That's our whole game, the sole aim. You know, that's it. Now we can't think further. We can't think out of the box. This is the only, you know, goal we have in this life. Unfortunately for now, yeah. Very true. Thank you. Salih abi, you wanna add any points?
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum, first of all. Yeah, I mean, what I understand, as long as we can speak of a separation between the worldly life and the religious life, then there's a problem. And the problem is the existence of such a separation. And studies, I think this the word only has to be emphasized, is because Allah has created us for this world and the hereafter. That Ustad is emphasizing the idea, the perspective or worldview, which kind of separates the worldly life and the religious life. And a part of us or a part of our time is dedicated or devoted to this world. So the separation is pathologic because separation is not what Quran is teaching us. Quran and Sunnah and in generally Islam is pushing us to the extent that we can intellectually and spiritually to unite things. So in Quran, so things are not separated. The meanings, the concepts are not separated, but they are this way or that way connected to just a couple of concepts like Tawheed, Nubuwwat, Akhirah, and Adalah. So these are the four pillars that Ustad is teaching us when he is talking about what the purpose of the Quran is, what the goal of the Quran is. And when it comes to us being Muslims, at the brief period that in which we pray, or within the brief period when the adhan is being recited, then there's a problem because in that case we have two personalities. And the good personality, which is the one which chooses to be a good Muslim, is manifesting itself or in service during just a brief amount of time. For example, just a couple of days I had this, so I was in the traffic and the car next to me, when we stopped at the red light, I could clearly hear the loud music. So when the music was playing, the azan started being recited and he lowered the music. But the music, I guess, so people might have different choices, but it was not the type of music maybe we should enjoy as Muslims. I cannot describe the music right now, but or for example, when there's something very extraordinary, when somebody, for example, tells bad words about the muqaddasat, the religious meanings that we devote ourselves, then we get angry and start to protect our religion. However, religion, when it is constrained and confined to very extreme cases, like for example, somebody rants on your religion, then this is problematic. And for example, driving the traffic and then being respectful to others should be a part of our religious personality. And Ustad is pointing out to the fact that when we confine our religious identity to only the times that we worship, then there's a problem. We have two identities, and that's problematic. We have to be equipped with a mindset which unifies all of our acts into one single superior or like sublime idea, which is to be a believer. So this only, the word only has such meanings, I guess, to me. Yeah.
Do you want to say a few words on this? So how this makes our world actions also more significant if we act upon both worlds, or as see this world as a preparation place for the next. So how it makes a difference in our actions.
So is this question to me or Colin Hocam?
Both of you.
I think Salah put it very well, very eloquently, and very compellingly. There is no split between the worldly and the religious. This is a false split. It's a false division, a false dichotomy. The only dichotomy that we can accept is the sacred and the profane, right? Or existence and non-existence. But there is no split between the so-called worldly and the so-called religious. You know, the struggle for livelihood is an act of worship, you know? So when Ustad poses these questions, for example, does your slackness in worship and remissness in the prescribed prayers arise from the multiplicity of your worldly occupations, or because you cannot find time due to the struggle for livelihood? Well, I would rephrase that and I would say, does your slackness in worship arise from the fact that you see your struggle for livelihood as being outside your devotion? Because, as I said before, we shouldn't be thinking in terms of acts of worship. This is our downfall. We actually sacralize acts of worship, we idolize them, and we fetishize them. And then we think that, for example, our struggle for livelihood, our licit profession, our job, our life outside of prayer and outside of fasting, we think that is somehow worldly or secular. It's not. But it becomes secular if you think it is. If you don't see washing your car or cooking your dinner or buying food at the shop, if you don't see that as a potential act of worship, then I don't really know what can be done. Because it's either an act of worship or it's an act of self-worship. There is no other category. There is no neutral category. There you do things for the sake of Allah or for the sake of nafs, and that includes those the prayer and the fast and the hajj and the shahada and the zakat, because it's quite possible that we can pray for the sake of nafs, to be seen to pray, or we go to Friday prayer because we don't like the neighbor to think that we don't go to prayer, or we go to hajj to virtue signal, for example. So all of these things, all acts can be done either for the sake of God or either for the sake of the self, including the so-called acts of worship. And I say so-called acts of worship, I don't mean so-called in the sense that they're not acts of worship, but they are only as worshipful as your intention. Now, if you think that it is only 5 acts which constitute your devotion, that is shahada, prayer, fasting, zakat, and hajj, then you have a problem, because you have secularized your faith. And unless you desecularize it, there is no help for you. There is no help for us. Because what we have done, we have compartmentalized our life and we have divided it into the worldly and the religious. And that is the way to perdition. That is the way to failure. It's not the way to success, and it's certainly not the way to salvation.
Thank you. Very nice. This point just brings my mind a second question. Just as the secular says, or the world says, everything, our work, our effort is also a worship. So what's the significance of the prayers? I can miss them, I will pray them sometimes and whenever I want, and sometimes not. So anyways, everything is a kind of act of worship. What's the significance of prayers then?
Prayers have a special significance, It's like saying, if I do maths, if I do math, you call it math in USA, we say maths here, right? I can just do the 2 times table, 2 + 2 = 4, That's not all there is in math, Math also has algebra, it also has equations, it also has trigonometry, geometry. Some of those things are special and some of those things have a special place. We also have specific acts of worship which are prescribed. Why are they prescribed? Because they carry a weight which we can't understand. They carry something special. So those 5 times a day prayer is in line with the revolutions that we see and the motions and the flux that we see in the cosmos and in our environment and in the day. We have the alternation of day and night, we have the wind, we have the movement of the moon, the movement of the sun. All of these also play a part. And so there are certain times of the day which have been sacralized, in a sense, more than other times of the day. And at those times, prayer is prescribed because Allah has decreed that we should pray at that time. That is the time for a particular prayer. You know, night is the time to sleep, day is the time to seek sustenance, and then you have specific times throughout the day where you are supposed to break away from whatever you're doing and stand in prayer. Just in case you weren't communing with God, God gives you an opportunity to commune with him and to come back out of that negligence. Ideally, there is no negligence, but because we are creatures of forgetfulness, then we often forget our Creator, we often forget our relationship. And so those prescribed prayer times are like safety nets. And those safety nets keep us from total negligence and total forgetfulness. So those prayers have a very, very important function. If they didn't exist, then as you say, we could say, well, everything is worship, so I won't do the prayer. But then what happens if you're negligent and you forget to make your search for sustenance worshipful? If you forget that, and if you don't have those prescribed times, then you don't have those safety nets, you know, and that warning bell, that azan that goes off and tells you, right, okay, you have to come back now and you have to rededicate yourself to your relationship with your Creator. So those times are very important for many, many reasons that we can't articulate even.
And also, there's also this word in the Quran which says, Iqamatu Salah. So Iqama means establishing. So there's some misconception that all of us might have been falling into the, and this is to confine pondering upon the meanings that are to be manifested, are supposed to be manifested in the 5 daily prayers only to the times that we actually practice the act of praying. However, in Quran, this is never the case. Allah says, Iqama is, I guess, establish. So it has to be not a discrete set of actions, but it has to be a continuous action. And it has to have some sort of existence within our life, in all of our actions, in all of our, not bodily actions, but also our attitude, our understanding, our thinking, way of thinking, our perspective, our relations with others. Or say, for example, if I enjoy eating watermelon, it has to have some meaning that is related to the meanings that are supposed to be, pondered upon while praying. So it is very intermingled. So everything is supposed to be connected. And what I understand from why we have these particular 5 times prayers is because Allah knows our fitrat. And you already mentioned this, we are forgetful. So we have to replenish our emotions, our ideas, our thoughts again and again. And prayer is an opportunity. And so this is an opportunity, but the level of consciousness and also the amount of effort that we put forward to make this and turn this into an opportunity to replenish all of these emotions and thoughts and good feelings about our religion. If this is not accomplished while we are praying, then that is another sign. So if we think that Salat does its job and increase my awareness, then this is another signal. This is a negative signal, but it is still a signal. Ustad is in one part of the Risale-i Nur saying that after talking about the meaning of Surah Al-Fatiha, there's a footnote. Always the students of Nursi is asking, should we think about the meaning of the verses while we are praying in this depth and breadth? The Ustad says no. In other times, you should be already reading about these matters. You should be already dedicating time to internalize these meanings. Then while we are actually praying, these meanings are going to come kind of automatically. So this gives me the lesson that confining these activities, these intellectual activities, just to the time of praying, it will not work. We have to spread this. These actions have to diffuse into our daily life. So it has to be everywhere while you're walking, talking to others, having conversations with your friends, with your wife, husband, everywhere.
I think you're absolutely right, you know, and if prayer is supposed to be the mi'raj of the mu'min, you know, the ascension of the believer, if you are not actually rising and ascending during the day, then the mi'raj will not be the high point. How can you reach a high point if you haven't even taken off the ground, you know?
True.
So if you're not moving towards that ascension, then it won't be an ascension for you, because you know you can only pray as you live, and you can only live as you pray. So if you are spending all of the day in negligence, then the prayer is an opportunity for you to break that negligence. But it's going to be difficult for you to break it if you're not in the custom of communing with the Creator. You know, if you're not in the custom of being with the Creator, of being with Him and speaking with Him and being alongside Him all the time and thinking of Him and keeping Him in your mind, keeping His names in your mind and looking at His face, because His face is everywhere. His face is not just in the namaz, in the salah, or in the fast, or in the Friday prayer. His face is everywhere, you know, everywhere throughout the creation. Everywhere is a reminder. And if we're not seeing Him in that way, then how can we suddenly, you know, take off and go to, you know, Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, which is the very furthest point of prostration. In other words, the very furthest point of my submission today should be my namaz, you know. My Masjid al-Aqsa should be the very pinnacle of my understanding of my ubudiyah. How can that happen if the rest of the day is just wasted in secular dreams?
Yeah, forgetfulness is not from Muslims. And I liken the situation to helicopters or quadcopters, because this is the topic that I have been studying for years. When you turn off the motors, you start falling, and the effort it takes to, you know, take off and reach at the elevation from which you fell off is much more difficult than just hovering in place. So you have to always have your propeller spinning at almost full speed. So falling is not an option for Muslims. So falling in this case means forgetting and slightly forgetting what you're supposed to ponder continuously, or at least in the level of emotions, we have to have something like working at the background. So I liken this to propeller spinning all the time. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. So we are not created on this world, but this world is kind of part of our creation, and it has a significance because of that being a part of that whole. as far as I understand from all the nice, beautiful explanations. And I want to continue to read a little more. You know that in regard to your abilities, you're superior to all the animals, but in regard to procuring the necessities of worldly life, you cannot compete with even a sparrow. So why can you not understand that your basic duty is not to labor like an animal, but to strive for a true perpetual life like a true human being? So inshallah we'll focus on this, but this is not an excuse for us, our other struggles, to ignore our human duties, as far as I understand from this.
Yeah, Ustad here is not telling do not labor. He is telling us not to labor like an animal. And I guess we already talked about this. So like an animal means, I guess in this case, not to use the inner faculties like qalb, ruh, aql, sir, and all other emotions that Allah has given us. So they have to be functioning this way or that way, and establish connections to Allah hereafter, nubuwwah, adala. So laboring is totally fine, but laboring like an animal is not acceptable. And Ustad is
Yeah.
pointing out to this fact when he's talking to railway workers. So they say, as long as you pray your 5 daily prayers, all the good deeds that you do in between those prayers are going to be written on your book as good deeds, as long as these are carried with good faith. So laboring is fine.
Ustad shares this example in many parts of the Risale. For my nafs, it's very helpful because this is how we live. You know, the morning we wake up, we just think about what we are gonna eat today, what am I going to put on, and how is it gonna be, you know, the rest of the day for me. How am I going to, you know, get my needs? So then if I compare myself to, you know, with these basic things, it's very easy to see that, you know, I'm capable of doing many things better than the animals, but the small things, they just take care of it very easily. You know, it's just in a short time they just can, you know, find their food or take care of their livelihoods. But for a human being, it takes years. So it shouldn't be the sole aim, you know, for the human being. There should be something behind it for the human, you know, that this simple acts of livelihood is not human beings' sole aim, obviously. In addition, the things you call worldly occupations mostly do not concern you and are trivial matters which you meddle in officiously. You neglect the essential things and pass your time acquiring inessential information as though you were going to live for 1,000 years. For example, you squander your precious time on worthless things, like learning what the rings around Saturn are like, or how many chickens there are in America, as though you were becoming an expert in astronomy or statistics. So, any experience you want to share on this part? That
I
this
think,
is,
yeah, I think maybe what Ustad is alluding to partly is to the many useless pastimes and useless uses of human activity which exist and which we seem to think are necessary. If you think solely in the area of, food production, how much food is produced, how many different kinds of food are produced, processed foods, I mean, not basic staples, but processed foods. And I've mentioned this before, when I was a child, many, many years ago now, there were basically, for, a working class kid like me, there were basically two kinds of chocolate, milk chocolate, dark chocolate. That was it, tamam, finished. Now there are two aisles in the supermarket that are dedicated just to chocolate. There may be 400, 500 different kinds of chocolate. Do we need so many different kinds of chocolate? So many different kinds of biscuit? So many different kinds of cake? So many different kinds of this or that? And this is just in the area of food production, clothes production, various other things that we need, like white goods. How many different kinds of utensil and all of these, the accoutrements of modern living. Most of it we don't need, and we squander our time not just on worthless things like learning, what the rings around Saturn are like, but on producing things that we don't need. If you go to a mall, in America, which for me, it's like pieces of hell on earth, you find 90% of the things you find in a mall or in what they call here supermarkets in the UK are unnecessary. If they were to throw away 90% of the things in a huge departmental store, they would still have too much. So what causes us to miss and to be distracted from the truth is unnecessary production. And that's not just the production of food and clothes and other items, but the production of knowledge as well.
Interesting. Salah, any words on this?
So squandering, is that something that I can say myself from practicing? But I really would like to, think about, so learning what the rings around Saturn is not all useless. I don't think this is what Ustad is talking about, because he's also talking about the positions of stars and other things, other combinations of embroideries in the creation. So his words, Ustad's words, are not absolute again, I guess. As long as there's a way to connect what we learn by counting the rings around, the number of rings around the Saturn. So this piece of information is not going to be useless, and this action would not be categorized as squandering. But I guess the point is, despite putting so much effort in learning such a very niche piece of information, which also requires a lot of technological advancements, so you can imagine in your mind what other labor has been what is needed before you can really count the number of rings about Saturn. So if the end product is just the number itself, then it is useless. And this is unfortunately the case in the science. And the general practice is to claim that these are all for the development of the civilization and science and better cities and things like that. But I guess everything boils down to whether you can establish or make use of these new pieces of information to establish connections with your creator. Then that's the thing. It's not as precious and valuable as reading Quran and understanding a verse or understanding a niche meaning in a verse. It's much more valuable because it's Kalamullah. But this is another type of Kalamullah. I mean, the embroidery is written in the book of the universe. As long as you can connect these to your creator, there's a value. But if there's no connection, then it is garbage. This is how I understand.
I think you're right. I think that's what Ustad means. I mean, if you are someone who is importing chickens into America, then maybe you need to know how many chickens there are in America. But if you're not, then none of our business, none of my business how many chickens there are in America. You see that in most of the Western countries now, information is being conflated with knowledge and wisdom. What most people garner and collect when they are educated is information, not knowledge and not wisdom. And the emphasis is on the collection of information. We live in information, in a world of information, in an information culture. And that's why you would see when there are, on popular television, they have quizzes, they have competitions. It's all based on what they call general knowledge. So people who can remember facts, people who can remember how many chickens there are in America. And we are actually encouraged, and it's inculcated in us in school to be the collectors and the memorizers of information rather than knowledge, and definitely not wisdom. So this is what Ustad is saying, is this information is only good for those who need that information. I don't need to know how many chickens there are in America, none of my business. So, what he's actually saying in this is he's telling us not to go after that which is unnecessary, whatever it may be, in whichever field.
So when I was in elementary school, I guess I was at the age of 8, 9, or something like that, I found a book in our bookshelf, and it was all the Guinness World Records up until that date. And it had all kinds of garbage information. So this is the largest pizza that has ever been,
Yes,
baked.
yes. I used to have those every year. I had a new one. They used to produce them every year, and I used to love those books as a child.
Yeah,
But that's the problem, these things are very enticing. They're very attractive, but ultimately they're rubbish, as you say, garbage.
yeah. When I was almost half the way in reading the book, I felt like uh, like drinking water but not quenching your thirst. I said, okay, so where is this going? So what kind of perfection should I expect from learning all of these like discrete, unrelated pieces of information? I guess I stopped reading this at some point because I was so bored, because there was no connection to nothing in my life. Actually, I was just 8 or 9 years old. There's not too much that I can connect at that age, but there were not even connection between the matters in the book. So, so, so what Ustad is talking about, I guess, is something like that. This is how I feel. It might be different for you, Colin Hocam, or by Karabi, but so I had an experience about this like Guinness World Record book. Reading that book was kind of weird.
So thank you so much. As far as I understand, then Salat is the alignment, the balance for not only in our understanding, but also in our faith, or in our, it provides the alignment in the practice sense. As you said, it could be an information that I can use for Marifatullah, which is good, or it could be just an information by itself, which has no benefit for me in this world or the akhirah. So I need to maybe leave it aside, just not busy myself. And I don't want to give this example because it's sometimes it has a negative effect on some people, but you know, I used to be a soccer fan, but sometimes, you know, we go so excessive in some things, you know. For example, sometimes I talk to some people, they can name me all the, you know, players of a team, and then how much they are getting for this year, in how many games they played, you know, etc., etc., every single detail. But when I ask what class your son is going this year, said, he was at 6th or 7th grade. You know, this was very interesting to me, because sometimes we ignore very crucial, you know, fundamental things in our lives, and go and, you know, learn about these things. Yes, it could be, you know, uh, something, you know, looks significant to us, but you know, maybe we should give a second thought what is really important and what is not. So maybe level them, grade them, you know, one by one, and prioritize, you know, accordingly. Otherwise, there's no balance, there's no alignment in our lives, and we will not be here for sure forever in this life. You know, we don't have time for trivia.
There's a very good comment there was, if I can find it, from Sharani family. There was one before from Harun as well, but the Sharani family is relevant to what you're just saying, Baikar, because they say, I think we like information, both secular and religious, because it's easier to imitate. It doesn't require any reasoning by the heart, and it doesn't require any search for meaning. And this is a very, very important point, and particularly within the context of Muslim scholarly tradition, the most prevalent scholarly field in our scholarly tradition is fiqh, is jurisprudence, and Muslim law and legal theory. And why is it popular? Because mostly it involves facts. It involves memorizing facts. That's all. And it's very sweet to memorize facts. It's what canon lawyers do, you know. They read case law and they remember the cases, and then they act on precedent. And this is what our fuqaha do. And this is why it's very, very popular, because it's very easy to imitate. One only has to memorize. It doesn't trouble the nafs at all. It doesn't question the nafs. In fact, it flatters the nafs, because it gives expertise very, very quickly. One can very quickly become, you know, a Google sheikh, you know. It's very, very easy. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of them, because all they do is they take in this information, they take in these facts, and then they regurgitate them. No wisdom is involved, no real knowledge is involved. It's just the recycling and the reproduction of information about law.
Very interesting, very interesting. So not only again, we don't want to differentiate, but our what we call as worldly occupations, but the worship or the things that related to our religious practices, if they lack the meaning, they could be also just something that doesn't really help us in that sense.
Certainly, definitely. And this is what Imam Ghazali, in the very first chapter of Ihya Ulumuddin, in his chapter on ilm, this is what he berates, and this is what he bemoans. You know, the fact that the original meaning of fiqh was tafaqquh, was to deliberate on the names of Allah, and within 200-300 years it had changed, and what it become was to deliberate on the minor rules and regulations of Allah. It changed totally. And one of his complaints was, you know, we have completely hollowed out this sacred discipline, and we have turned it into the accumulation of useless facts. Not completely useless. Fiqh has its place, but for the number of people today studying fiqh, it's completely out of proportion. And I think the Sha'rani family have put their finger on it. That really does, the hammer hits the nail there. We like information because it's easy to imitate and reproduce. It doesn't require any great search for meaning, and it doesn't trouble the nafs.
MashaAllah, these explanations deciphered why certain people act in the way they do. So this memorizing kind of might be boosting our ego. Can we say this?
I think it flatters the ego. Fiqh actually does flatter the ego.
Yeah, interesting.
So not to be misunderstood, none of us are saying that we shouldn't learn fiqh, but we should learn it with the meanings and the spirit and the what it represents in our lives and all of those effects on our lives. We should digest it, not just memorize it.
Well, I would say that as long as there is a faqih in our community, no one needs to learn fiqh at all.
All the details of very
there needs to be we have the books of fiqh, because this is not farz ayn,
So we are not talking about the basics of fiqh that we practice every day. Of course.
No. I mean, we have to know the basics, but we don't have to become faqih. To studying fiqh is not farz ayn, it's farz kifai. As long as one person, there is a faqih, you don't need to go and study fiqh. Or you need to know enough to be able to do the basics. That's all.
And we're definitely not meaning that like learning or memorizing religious or secular information flatters ego, but also, unfortunately, knowing these meanings, like so what Ustad is talking about, and the meanings that are in depth and in breadth covered in the Risale-i Nur also might result in that person flattering his or her nafs. So there is no path is 100% safe, because Rasulullah is saying, خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ إِلَّا الْعَالِمُونَ خَلَقَ الْعَالِمُونَ إِلَّا الْعَامِلُونَ وَخَلَقَ الْعَامِلُونَ إِلَّا الْمُخْلِصِينَ وَالْمُخْلِصُونَ عَلَى خَطَرٍ عَظِيمٍ. The end of the hadith says even the mukhlisun, who are sincere in their actions and their ilm, they are still in danger. So nobody claims that, this path ends up being that person flattering himself or herself, but the other does not. There's always a path to misguidance, unfortunately. So we have to be always careful. So the audience should not understand that this is what we mean. There's always a path that we might enter in putting ourselves in danger. Even if you're a Nur student, this is possible, unfortunately.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, again, we are at the end of time. I am not sure if we will be covering the rest of this chapter for the next week, or maybe we can read a different section about Salat. But I want to only read the question. Inshallah, brothers and sisters can read the answer themselves, or maybe inshallah we will have the opportunity to follow up next week. If you say what keeps me from the prayers and worship and causes me to be lax is not unnecessary things like that, but essential matters like earning a livelihood. So this is also an interesting part of the question. And I want to stop here. If we have any closing comment or suggestion for next week, please feel free to add. And I thank you so much for the contributions at the chat part. I didn't have a chance to go through them one by one. I didn't want to conversation, to cut the conversation. It was flowing very nicely, and unfortunately, we are at the end of the time. And any last words before we closing?
No, thank you
Okay,
very much for moderating.
thank you. Salah, you want to make a dua to close?
Before that, actually, I missed all of the chat messages. Is it possible to post this in the WhatsApp group? Because I would like to read those.
Can you say it again, Salah?
Oh, I was saying that, so there are a lot of chat messages, which I
Okay.
unfortunately missed, but maybe I should take a screenshot. Okay. Jazakallah for joining the discussion today. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين الفاتحة.
اللهم صل على